Hello and welcome to the all new, all different number one comics podcast, episode number 53. I'm Dan. That's Bob. Say hello, Bob.
Hello, Bob.
We are a weekly comic book podcast where each and every episode we take a deep dive into a brand new first issue comic book, break down the story and art, give it somewhat of a review, and tell you if we think that you should move on to issue number 2 or not. We also talk a little bit of comic book and related news as well as what's new at comic book shops this and next week. Bob, this week we're going to be taking a very, very deep or surface level dive into
the new number 1 from Titan Comics, Rebel Moon, House of the Bloodaxe.
That's right, Bob. It's the House of the Bloodaxe. It's Rebel Moon. It's Scott Snyder's vision of, Dune, Star Wars, every big sci-fi epic that took place before it, I guess.
Yeah.
And we're here to talk about it, believe it or not. So we're going to take a very quick break, and we'll be back. And we are back with episode number 53 of the all new, all different number one comics podcast. Bob, it's, as you know, the beginning of the year still. We're on week number 2 of January 2024. Comic book news is pretty damn light, as it has been lately.
Yeah, beginning of the year, it's going to be light.
Yeah, at the end of the year it was light. The beginning of the year it's light. Hopefully we get something happening in the middle of the year. I don't know. I guess
we'll find out. Right in the middle is when you get, movies coming out, sure. And, comic events and such.
Sure. And speaking of movies coming out, and I know this is a TV show or a streaming show. Do you call things a TV show anymore? Is that how you refer to them?
That's how I refer.
It's still on the TV,
yeah.
Right? It's just not like regular network television. Maybe I guess
who has cable anymore?
No one, but I guess that's the evolution of it, right?
Yeah.
Streaming has replaced network TV,
yep.
So
yep.
Maybe you could just call streaming network TV at this point because they are on networks.
Eventually, Disney's gonna own all of them.
I hope so. I hope they, speaking of Rebel Moon and it being on Netflix and all of that, I hope at some point Disney takes over Netflix so it's not such a garbage service anymore. But we all know how I feel about Netflix, so I can't hide my opinion on that. As far as news, Bob, there's not a whole lot out there. We got a new trailer for The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. I just peeked at that before we started recording here, but not being a huge Walking Dead fan or somebody who really watched the original Walking Dead, there's not much there.
Did we really need another spin-off?
Not in my opinion. It must be selling well enough for some people to be into.
I didn't know I didn't think zombies were near as popular as they used to be.
Well, they have a lot of longevity because, unless you kill them, Bob, they just stay alive forever. So,
I guess.
Yeah, the ones that, haven't been killed are still just walking around.
You got to take that headshot.
Yes, exactly. You got to House of the Dead style. Get in there and get them. But
maybe that's what Robert Kirkman did wrong. He didn't aim for the head.
Absolutely.
He's got to take the Thor Thanos initiative.
Yep.
Aim for the head.
Yeah, I don't know. This is another Walking Dead. That's all I can say about it. It just seems like more of the Walking Dead. I'm not too sure. The zombies looked a little bit different. I'll give it that. I don't know if they're evolved or I'm not sure when this takes place. It says The Ones Who Live, so I'm assuming it takes place after the Walking Dead proper and the ones who lived after that. I don't know if that's what it's referring to. I never watched the end of The Walking Dead, so I don't know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely say, but I don't know. Possibly interesting to some people out there who are really into The Walking Dead. We also got confirmation that Ahsoka Season 2 is officially moving forward. Great news for Bob. News for me. But Ahsoka's moving forward with Season 2. I've heard great things. Again, I haven't seen any Ahsoka, so...
Well, also, before you go further in other Star Wars news... Mm-hmm. Jon Favreau's actually going to direct a Mandalorian-led Star Wars movie.
Oh wow! A whole movie. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
So it sounds like how for The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, how Dave Filoni will be the George Lucas, mm-hmm. and he'll have a separate director.
Okay, and this is Okay, I think I saw this news. This I didn't realize it was a full-fledged movie, but this is like the Mandalorian and the Baby Yoda character, right?
Yeah, they're saying Mandalorian and Grogu, but there's been talk about a Dave Filoni movie which is going to tie all the TV series together, have all the characters. So I'm wondering if this is that movie. Which, I mean, Jon Favreau, of course, director of arguably one of the best Marvel movies of all time.
Yeah.
In the one that started it all.
Yeah, Jon Favreau, really good director. I think we can all agree that Jon Favreau's top notch there. Really good creator. Well, Bob, that's interesting. Again, it's, I guess, unofficially titled the Mandalorian and Grogu. So they're Grogu. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Well, interesting. In other news,
just say Baby Yoda.
Yeah,
everybody does.
Yeah, I agree. In other news, again, not much here. Amazon has officially ordered Criminal to be a series with Legendary producing. Criminal, if you don't remember, is the Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips comic from 2006 from Icon. It's a series that interweaves several generations of families tied together by the crimes and murders of the past. And yeah, it's been optioned now with a showrunner and writers attached to adapt it. And yeah, I've got a few copies of this first book. I've never actually read it, so I don't know much about it. Obviously sounds like a crime thing, but Ed Brubaker, a wonderful writer, so I don't know. Get up on that if you can, I guess. That's really all I have for the news. Bob, I do want to ask you, and I think I know what the answer is because you just told me about how little sleep you've gotten the last couple of days, but did you have any chance to check out Echo or the first episode of Echo or any of that dropped?
I didn't even know it dropped, to be honest.
Echo dropped. And let me tell you this.
Wow.
I had to stop because I had to read my comic and all of that, of course. But I made it up to the 4th episode. I think there's only 5 released, maybe 6. I can't remember, but
6, I believe. Okay.
Damn, this is good. If this is this will definitely put the MCU back on the map, in my opinion. This is so good. Like, I could not turn it off. I started it this morning, and like I said, I woke up, put it on first thing, watched 3 episodes, then I had to get ready and go to the comic book shop, pick up my books, came home, watched some more to the point where I had to stop and start reading comics. So it was really good what I've seen so far. Really amazing. Kingpin stuff is insane, is all I will say, and keep it spoiler free, but it's really good. And then some of the nooks and crannies that we get into in like Echo's world and especially what's going on with Kingpin, phenomenal. Like, just really good stuff. Now, the early reviews and stuff of this have been really good. The critic review, of course, on Rotten Tomatoes, because we all know everybody wants the MCU to fail at this point.
Yes.
Are like 73, I think. So it's the second lowest rated MCU project.
Because Rotten Tomatoes is the end all be all of
and
reviews.
I mean, and you remember a few months ago when the news came out that it was rigged anyways. So I don't know why we're even putting any stock into Rotten Tomatoes at this point. But yeah, they clearly want the MCU to fail because, Bob, I'm telling you, once you sit down and watch the first episode of this, you'll be hooked. It is so ridiculously good. I'm really stoked on it, and I can't wait for you to see it so we can talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, I just wanted to get that out there. It's out. It's really good. If you're on the fence about watching it for any reason, for secret invasion reasons or anything like that, check it out. It is really insanely good. Yeah, really good.
How many people do you actually think got turned off of Marvel TV because of Secret Invasion?
I think probably a good amount. I think a lot of people, it was like the final nail in the coffin for them being excited about any MCU stuff. Just because, nothing big enough or exciting enough happened for them, all of that. You have, somebody like me who's, really into all that stuff, and I never made it. I didn't, watch past the first episode. Not because it was bad, it just wasn't interesting enough. It wasn't gaining my interest or whatever. I can say the complete opposite about Echo. I mean, it hooks you in the second it starts.
Yeah, I'll have to give it a watch. Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
it's really good.
I mean, anything with Kingpin's going to be good because,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Vincent D'Onofrio, I mean, he's done such a great job. And I have to say, I was skeptical, as I'm sure a lot of people were.
Oh, yeah.
When I found out he was Kingpin. One of the big things is I just didn't think he was big enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean it. If you're going for sheer size, you can't get much better than Michael Clark Duncan.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a good Kingpin. I'll give it that. Yeah.
So I mean, movie as a whole,
yeah,
meh.
I mean, hey, I enjoyed it, but it's what we had at the time. Is all I can say. Yeah, just how it opens up what you know about Kingpin and how it continues his story and everything. Phenomenal. Where it goes with Kingpin, really, really good. It really develops his story and his character a lot. For somebody that's in the comics at least. I mean, obviously he's been expanded a lot in the comics. He's Mayor Fisk, all of that for a while and everything. But as far as what we've seen on the screen with Kingpin and the Netflix shows and all of that, this just really expands it to a level where I was really, really happy with where it's going. And I still have maybe an episode and a half left, so I'm really excited about that. I can't wait to see it.
I wonder if it'll end with where he got shot in the head.
I can't answer anything, Bob, but just know that you'll be nice and surprised whenever all of it comes out. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about some books that dropped in comic book shops this week. And we are back with episode number 53 of the All New, All Different #1 Comics podcast. Bob, it's time to talk about some new books that dropped in comic book shops this week, the week of January 9th, 2024. Of course, if any of these sound exciting or fun to you, you can still hit up your local comic book shops. We're recording this on Wednesday, day of release. We'll try to get it up, between today and tomorrow, which is Thursday. So you still got time to run out there to your local comic book shops if any of these sound of interest to you. Hit them up, give them a call, whatever. Let them know that you want these added to your pool box. From Dynamite Comics, we've got a new #1. Continuing in the Disney villains, whatever you call that. What do you call that? Line? I don't know. I can't.
Disney villain verse.
Yeah, sure. The Disney villain verse. I like that.
Yes, everything's a verse.
It is. We're getting Cruella de Vil #1. Bob, I'm actually really excited about this one. I definitely picked it up. #1, it's written by Sweeney Boo, who we know is freaking awesome, and also she does the cover art. She's not the artist in the book. That is someone else who I cannot pronounce her name. But this is Cruella de Vil is a really interesting character to me because a lot of times in Disney stuff you have like a wicked witch or somebody with powers or whatever. Cruella de Vil is just like a mean lady who wants to slaughter dogs. Yeah, like a coat. I don't know what else her purpose is really. She's just like an evil lady, just for the sake of being evil, I guess. And I think that's interesting. I think you can do a lot with that, especially out of context of what's in the movie. I think the voice of Sweeney Boo will be really, really good with this. I'm really excited to see what happens here. All of these Disney villain books have been much better than I anticipated they would be. And I'm definitely stoked to check this one out. So that is definitely a thumbs up from me. Over to Marvel Comics, we got Giant Size Spider-Man #1. This is an original story featuring Venom, Dylan Brock versus Miles Morales, as well as a reprint of Ultimate Comics Spider-Man issue 22. So, I mean, it's got... I think that, obviously... putting that original story in there, Venom versus Miles, that's what you're going to come for. It's nice to have that reprint of Ultimate Comics Spider-Man 22, but I'm really interested in that original story. We also got a new chapter in the whatever we're calling this, the end of the Krakoan era, I guess. This is Rise of the Powers of 10 or X, a 5-issue limited series that will tell part of the concluding story of the Krakoan age that began in 2019 with Powers of X and House of 10 or X or whatever. We also got from Marvel Star Wars issue 42. This one's got cover appearance of a Sith introduced in issue 35. Bob, our local shop, all of theirs were damaged, so we weren't able to pick this one up.
That was very disappointing.
Yeah, no Star Wars for us, but happens, I guess. And speaking of Ultimate Spider-Man, Bob, Ultimate Spider-Man came out today. We got a new. This is kicking off Ultimate Universe. The new Ultimate Universe that's starting now. This is the premiere issue, and I'm really excited about this. There was a lot of cool covers for this, and we know that. Have you seen any spoilers for this yet?
I have not.
Okay, so I won't say, I won't talk any spoilers here, but just know that some things happen, right off the bat, that you're gonna, I can't say there'll be a holy shit moment, but it'll definitely be oh wow, that's an interesting, way to go, is all I can say about that. We also got Wolverine number 41, the most violent Wolverine story ever told. And Bob, let me tell you from somebody who read this book, they told me, yes, this is the bloodiest, goriest, most insane Marvel comic you've ever seen. The most insane Wolverine story you've ever seen. And it apparently is just really, really good. So, very stoked to read that. Can't wait. Over to DC Comics, we got Green Lantern issue number 7 with the origin of Sinsen, and the lead into the Sinister Sons series. And we also got Titans Beast World issue number 4, the first team appearance of the Bureau of Sovereignty, I guess is the name of that. Bob, we also got from Image Comics Transformers number 4. This one got a great 1 in 50 variant cover, a spoiler variant with that character on the cover there. If that art rings a bell.
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah, that's a Megatron.
Okay, so Megatron. Yeah, good. Yeah. I had no clue, so I was hoping they'd jump in and check it out for me. But yeah, we got a spoiler variant there with Megatron on the cover. So very, very cool. And those are pretty much the notable books that came out this week. Again, there's more, but that's what we have in front of us here. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll return in just a moment. And we are back with episode number 53 of the all-new, all-different #1 Comics podcast. Bob, it is time for the portion of the show where we talk about the book that we decided to talk about this week. That being Rebel Moon, House of the Bloodaxe #1 from Titan Books, Titan Comics. I hate whenever they put books in the title instead of comics, It's this is a comic book. At least have a subdivision that's just comics. I don't know. Either way, on the front of the comic it says comics. So I'll take that. I'm going to read the synopsis really quick from their site. And let me tell you that the beginning of this is in all caps, so I got to yell all of it.
Oh, okay.
Comic book prequel to the highly anticipated Netflix movie Rebel Moon, created by acclaimed director Zack Snyder. Wow. Zack Snyder.
so Scott Snyder stopped doing Batman books?
No. We'll go with Zack Snyder. My bad. And it's also written by award-winning comics writer Magdalene Visaggio. Magdalene Visaggio. Sorry. I was going to trip up on that name no matter what. So, as war is looming on the horizon of planet Shasu, the leader of the Bloodaxe family is conflicted between living up to his father's domineering legacy and maintaining the peace. It's up to him to settle the conflicts within himself and his family before the entire planet erupts in war. We're going to take a second to talk about these creators before we get into my synopsis. Magdalene Visaggio, however I'm supposed to pronounce that. My apologies. I'm not great at pronouncing names.
We haven't figured this out by now.
Yeah, not in 53 episodes we haven't. Is definitely somebody who, you know, the second I saw her name, even though I don't know how to pronounce it, I knew the name and familiar with some of her work. She's written on Strangelands for Humanoid, if you remember Humanoid's comics. That was like in 2019. A really cool story. It was. I really liked it a lot. It was an interesting book. Probably a little bit too hard for me to explain here in just a second, but really interesting book. Also did for DC's imprint Young Animal back in 2018, Eternity Girl. A book that I really loved a lot. That was a really cool series. You know, kind of a mashup of superhero and spy stuff. It was a fun book and very well written. From Vault Comics, Vagrant Queen, A Planet Called Doom. From Black Masks, Sex, Death, Revolution. And did some work on Valiant Comics, which, you know, is right up my alley there. So Dr. Mirage and Vagrant Queen. Also, if you remember the book from Ani Press in 2019, Morning in America, the one that had that great kind of They Live looking cover to issue number 1, that was her work as well. So definitely somebody, you know, I'm pretty familiar with. And then the artist here, Clark Bint, Bint for those who can pronounce better than me. I'm going to go with Bint, but I don't know if that's how I'm supposed to pronounce it or not. They've worked on Scout Comics, Frank at Home, On the Farm, Killtopia, Blade Runner 2039, Coming Home, Quarantine, and a few other works. But seems to be a newer kind of creator there. And now I'm going to go into my synopsis. You'll have to excuse me. This is a pretty stumbly sounding synopsis. If you can't tell, you know, by the lead up to it, that I'm going to have a little bit of trouble with this one. So I guess just bear with me if you can. Rebel Moon, House of the Bloodaxe, opens with a place called Shasu, is how I'm going to pronounce it, 30 years ago. And our character, and the reason I'm going to say things like our character and stuff like that, I didn't catch any names, really. If I did, it was very convoluted and hard to tell that it was a name. So I'm just going to say our character, or our kind of lead character here, travels to the land of his mother's people and hunts a giant alien creature called a Kreger. Kreegger. I'll go with Kreger.
It looked like Kreger to me.
All right, sounds good. A native then fights and kills the Kreger, and he seemingly stays with her for the next 20 years until her death. And at this point, we realize that communications with other worlds and trade has stopped for some reason. The question comes of who will protect all these people now that our main character's mate is dead. And after a few days, the communication network has been restored. As they tried to figure out who severed the lines of communication, we find that a family was attacked and possibly murdered. We then get to the southern, a rebellious part of this world, and we find that the royal family was the one that was killed. Arguments about blood axes and non-blood axes begin, and then we flash back to 30 years ago, again, like at the beginning of the book, and the man, the main character, and the woman at the beginning, Kreger fight, make out, and the story ends. So obviously, you know, the reason I say make out there, we're just supposed to see that they, you know, kind of got together and started a love or a family or whatever. But I would say, let me say this disclaimer before we start breaking this down. My synopsis makes it sound, you know, like it's a kind of like a cohesive story that's easy to understand. I think the bones of it are there. I think that it is a cohesive, easy to understand story that is just layered upon layered upon layered upon layered with exposition. So it really was a feat to try to get through this and understand exactly what they were trying to say with all the words and worlds and races and everything introduced here. I think that, you know, obviously Zack Snyder is trying to create his big sci-fi epic, his big Dune, his Star Wars, whatever. And I don't see any problem with that. You know, a lot of people do that. it's a little convoluted in comic book form for me. But that's just my disclaimer. I don't want to ruin the review. Obviously, we'll get into it and break it down and see what we thought. Let's go into the story beats, Bob. I want you to lead this conversation with the story beats, and then I want to say my piece on it.
Wow, where can I start with story beats? Like you just said, it's a little too exposition heavy, and I'll tell you, I mean, when I have a comic with good story beats, I mean, I can get like everybody else, I can get through it in no time.
Yep.
And it feels like it was free flowing, and it didn't take any time. This comic, not at all. It was a total slog to get through.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to go with it too. I'm going to say it like this, and I've said this 100 times on the podcast. You know, I always try to read these 2 or 3 times, you know, to try to really absorb what's going on before I break them down and suggest them to people or not or whatever. I don't have a problem with exposition. Sometimes you need exposition. When you're introducing a world, you need exposition. That makes sense. But I will say this, and we talked about this before we started recording. Because of the comparisons to Star Wars or Dune, I'm going to have to take it in that direction. It's not... I don't want to hold that against Zack Snyder, or definitely not Magdalene here, because I don't think that any of this is her fault. I think that it's the world building, and of course we're going to get into that in our review and everything, but take something like Star Wars. How easy was it to sit down the first time and watch A New Hope? You know, didn't it just breeze by and make you so interested in what came after it and all of that? It was just such an interesting way to tell a story because of the way it was told. I mean, you're dropped right there with Luke, like you're in Luke's POV, and all the exposition takes place through that character. Now, take something like this where instead you know, it seems like you needed to know what was going on before. It seems like you've got to introduce all of this stuff, all these weird names that you don't understand, all these different places, all this hierarchy and everything else that you just don't quite get. It moves along at like a really weird pace whenever you have to do it that way. And I'm not trying to say that they should come out and copy Star Wars or anything, but I mean, that is one of the greatest fiction stories ever told. So, you know, I mean, maybe you might want to take away a little from at least the way they tell the story. I think that, you know, once you break this down, it is very simple. It's just we have 2 characters that fall in love. You know, you have somebody from a different world who comes over to this world, falls in love, starts a family. There's a royal family, whatever. Communications get severed, and now we're on the brink of war. Okay, that's pretty easy to get through, but I mean, the first time reading this book, I did not get any of that.
Well, here's a comparison I have to the you know, story beats and the overall narrative and all that. It kind of reminded me of, and you know, I continue with this, you know, series, and it's become one of my favorites. I don't know if you have, but it kind of reminded me of when we reviewed Sirens of the City.
Yes.
And that first issue just, you know, focused on it didn't narrow its focus.
Yeah,
it just had such a wide, vague focus. And, you know, that's one thing this book is. It doesn't really focus on anything, anyone, you know, one thing. You know, it doesn't, you know, focus on, you know, building up the world or anything like that. It just, you know, goes from, okay, this person, to this animal, to this world. It just, you know, it's too much.
Yeah, it's almost like it throws us in and then expects us to already be interested. And like, no, you kind of have to earn that. You know, you can't just say, you're going to be interested in this. So here's all the exposition and everything that backs it up. And then here's the name of all of these characters and all of these places and everything. I need to live in the world a little bit.
I mean, yeah, you can't just say, oh, here's a sci-fi story by Zack Snyder.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's its selling point, and I think that I'm going to have to be really careful about this because I'm like skirting a weird line here. I'll go ahead and say it like on Front Street. I don't like the concept. I don't like the execution, but it is not the fault of the writer. I think that she did very well, again, because once I peel it back and look at what's underneath, it's a cohesive story and it makes sense. But I think that, to get all of that information out there that had to be out or whatever, maybe, you really need to build a world and not try to do it in 4 issues as a prequel.
Unfortunately, it was one of those, she did the best with what she had. She did the best with the story.
Yes.
And unfortunately, when you hear those phrases put together, it's not very, it doesn't, make the story out to be very good.
Yeah, exactly. I feel bad saying it, but that's going to be on front here. So, so then the narrative, I don't know, Bob, this is, we've already started off on this foot. So
I don't really exactly know what the narrative is.
I agree. It's very confusing. I think, again, why not just give us like a POV character instead of exposition? Don't drop me there and say 30 years ago on this world, this took place. Why not have that character, go to this world or whatever from wherever they're coming from? Again, I need a little bit of investment from the narrative here. Why do I care about this character? I don't know where they came from. I don't know their story before this. I'm not saying give me a prequel comic of this character, but, maybe a page of, all right, it's time to leave my home world because of this reason, and I'm going to go to this world. And again, that POV would have really helped the narrative. It would have helped me become a little bit more invested in what that character had going on. I don't even know this character's name. I've read the book twice. I've written a synopsis about it. I don't know who I'm talking about here. That shouldn't be, I should be a little bit more invested in what's going on with them, where they came from and their name and everything else.
Well, and then you get, that last panel at the very end where, they're making out. It's kind of like, where in the narrative did it, was there any kind of, romantic sexual tension between those two?
Yes, exactly. No, completely agreed. It's just like so much of what happens in this book wasn't earned. It's just placed there. And I think that's, I don't want to say that's poor writing, again, because it's so weird to say that this was written well, but the source sucks or something. I'm not sure exactly what I want to say about it.
I'm just gonna say poor story concept.
Yes.
I'm not necessarily going to say poor writing, because you are right. The writing was good.
Mm-hmm. It made sense. It was written well.
I think the story is just kind of all over the place, and it leaves you scratching your head like, what?
Yeah, and if they want to tell this story, in my opinion, again, this is a big sci-fi epic. We're seeing the seeds being planted for this entire world to operate the way it is, and for, war and all of this stuff, this big, epic thing that's happening on this planet, and we've got to do it in 4 issues, and this was the kickoff of that, so we've got 3 more issues to go.
This didn't feel like a number 1 issue.
No, it didn't at all.
It felt like a number 2 or 3 issue where stuff has already been going on.
Exactly, like we should have already known a lot. Like I felt kind of stupid reading this.
Where a number 1 issue, it should introduce.
Exactly. I mean, go back and look at. I don't want to compare, apples to oranges here, but go back and look at, something like Amazing Spider-Man #1. I'm sure a lot of people have read that. If you haven't, the story or whatever, like, we're introduced to Peter Parker. We get to know Peter Parker. We get to know he's like a nerdy, clumsy high school student. And
that's what the majority of the book is.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
what the majority of issue 1 is.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, getting bit by the spider, turning into Spider-Man, it's all very important, but why would we care if we didn't care about Peter Parker first?
But that's introducing.
Yes. Just like, making the comparison to Star Wars. Why do we care if we don't first get introduced to Luke Skywalker and care about what he has going on? And then get invested in what Princess Leia is saying and all of those things. And then, there's just so many layers there and so many things to get invested in. And here it's lacking all of that. It's just, laying it out in black and white. Okay, here's the story. Care about it for whatever reason. It's just not working for me. Now, I will say this when we get into the dialogue. There's way too much dialogue and it's way too exposition heavy. And I really actually hated the fact that we got their native language split with our language.
Yeah.
There was no need for that.
Yeah,
and it really took up too much space and it was confusing. But the dialogue itself is well written.
I was going to say, I do like the dialogue. The only thing, and this is a trope. I mean, this is, I really can't say it a trope. I really can't say a trope. But this was also a, talking point about Guardians of the Galaxy, to bring that up. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you heard this. They don't really have their own language. You know what I mean? Yep. Like, there are times, there were a couple of times in this book where, one of them, I don't know his name, but he calls that beast an asshole. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, wait a minute. Why can't you just give them their own language? I mean, yeah, and I hate going back to Star Wars, but I mean, Star Wars has Nerf Herder. Yep. Mm-hmm. Which is basically their version of it.
Exactly. Introduce things in that way,
and I mean,
instead of
that was the same talking point as Guardians of the Galaxy, because it's like you're in space in a whole nother planet, but they have Earth-like sayings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just it was clunky, but it's not because it wasn't written well. So this is going to be a confusing review from us. Obviously, I think we're both saying that this writer clearly knows what she's doing and can write a story. Absolutely, can write dialogue and all of that.
I just think the story concept is just.
Yeah, it's not there. I mean, I don't care. I've heard way too many things exactly like this. This is way too generic. I don't care about any of this. How can you make me care about this? I don't know.
I mean, I don't want to say the draw of this book was, again, like I said, Zack Snyder, sci-fi epic. Yep. But it's hard not to think that was the draw of this book.
Yeah, I mean, if the movie is as boring as this book, I can't imagine trying to watch that movie. Is all I can say. No. So then I think probably the thing that this wants to get across the most, probably one of the most important questions we have about this book then is the world building. They're trying to build this whole new world and this whole franchise or whatever, this 2-part epic movie, and this is the prequel for it and everything. How did they do on the world building?
See, and this goes back to, and I talked about it, this goes back to just they don't narrow their focus. Mm-hmm. I mean, focus on, of course we get the name of the planet. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we really don't get a sense of, okay, the people, the scope of it, the various places.
And that's a big problem I have with it too, is like, there's too many wacky words in here that I don't know what they're referring to, and it's saturated with that. There's you should have taken it down a little bit and realized, this isn't a novel, this is supposed to be a comic book. I should have some kind of visual association with the words that you're saying, and I don't. Those aren't attached to anything. It's just like, here's this random word. I don't know. I can't, again, it's very troublesome to go through this book and say I don't know the name of our main character.
Yeah.
I know they talked about the mother's name or the female character who died. I know they said her name a few times. I didn't retain it at all. I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know what they're referring to. The only thing I got was the kind of rebellious side of the planet or world or whatever we're talking about. That now I don't remember the name of. So the Southern or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's just I have no idea really what's going on. So
and there's multiple times in this book that they refer to the motherland.
Mm-hmm.
What is the motherland?
Yeah, exactly. Is this the motherland? What is? I'm guessing.
Is that like a plane of existence?
Yeah, it got me. I have no clue. Let's get into the art then. I think that, at least for me, I can be a little bit nicer about the art than
I was just about to say, when I was reading this book, hands down, I think the art is the best part of this book.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it like this because it's going to go back and forth a little bit. I will say for characters, I don't really like the character art that much. I think they're detailed in a good way. I like... I don't think there was I think the artist spent time on them. I think the anatomy's there, everything looks good, but it's so generic.
There's something about when I was reading this also, there's just something about the faces that just seemed a little bit, I mean, like you said, the overall characters, the anatomy was, great. But, I mean, there was something about the faces that was just off to me, and I can't put my finger on it exactly.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm going to say this, too, and this is kind of to shit on Zack Snyder again, which I'm not here to do, but, I think that another big problem with this is, it being too generic. I blame Zack Snyder for that. He created this world that this comic book illustrator has to... draw in comic book form or whatever. He, kind of created the characters. I'm assuming these are the same characters that are in the movie, but even if not, they're based off of those characters. So why do they have such generic looks? Why do they look like... I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying make it look like Avatar or anything. I mean, I don't want a bunch of blue people, wandering around, but what is this? What am I supposed to think about these people? Then we have, like I told you, we have these characters that... I don't know. They almost look like maybe they're supposed to be like a C-3PO type of thing but then they have this cape on and this weird mask. What are those? What's going on here? I don't know. I'm gonna say the weakest link in the whole book, for me, is the character art. It's not good, and again, I don't blame the artist for that. The artist clearly knows what they're doing as well. It's just, I don't think they had anything to work with.
See, and that's horrible to say. I mean, yeah, I'm kind of like you. Like I said, I mean, I think there's something off about the faces, but I mean, other than that, I think the art is good.
Yeah, go to our next category, the backgrounds. I think the backgrounds look great.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in the backgrounds. It looks very, very lived in. The world is fleshed out. There's a lot of detail. The backgrounds look really good. Look at this panel where it's nighttime. We've got the cool, stylistic star flares in the background of the moons or planets or whatever. Looks great. Looks really, really good. So I don't think that it's the artist's fault, but some of this just falls really flat. Now, I've got a close-up panel on a character's mouth here. He's a mustached, villain guy or whatever. And, I mean, it looks like the dude has had 20 sets of braces. That's the most perfect teeth I've ever seen. And it just doesn't look realistic. I don't know what that is.
I was going to say, who exactly has, except that people who've gotten veneers.
Yeah, maybe he got his teeth. Maybe his teeth all rotted out, and those are dentures. I don't know. Poorly made dentures. I'm not sure, but it's just I don't know. It's not what I expect. It's not what I want. And to go back to something that it's trying to be, that Star Wars, that Dune or whatever. You take elements of real life and Earth and everything. I mean, look at a character like Luke Skywalker, even though he's placed there in the galaxy and other worlds and everything, like he's our familiar character. He looks like a human being, like it works.
And of course we know, Jedi and Sith are modeled after samurai.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I'm just not too sure what they were going for here. What was going on with this book? How about the locations? Then we do get locations. I'm just not sure exactly what they are, but I will say, the story moves throughout different locations. We have that first world, the Shashu, 30 years ago, where it's this, desert wasteland, and there's these weird trees and stuff.
That I'm just gonna equate to like the Serengeti.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Looks good though. Looks like a nice location. I mean, it's not super original, but it looks nice. A cool world, and then we get more to the the rugged, like mountainy looking areas and everything, and we have the night sky that looks great. We have more of this deserty type land, but there's like buildings that are kind of carved into the mountainside or whatever. It looks good. I think the locations work here. I think that those work fine. I don't see any problems with those. I don't know if you have any other thoughts that I didn't talk about. Okay. So then our last thing, of course, being the colors, our last thing before our recommendation or not, colors by Francisco Segala, I'm going to go with. I will say this. I think that the colors are a little uninspired and uninteresting. I think that it could have popped a little harder in certain areas. Now, I did compliment that kind of night sky area, that kind of rugged night sky with the buildings carved into the mountain and everything. That area is it's colored really well. I like the palette there and everything. Once we get into the regular daytime and stuff, I'm kind of bored with it. I don't think that the colors really shine
it's
here.
just too monochromatic. Now I do like, and you just passed it. I do like all of that.
Yeah, and look, the colorist knows what they're doing. I think that the palette's a little weird. I think that it's a little drab. It's a little dry. It's whatever. I'm going to go ahead and say this, like I said already, like I'm going to say about the entire book. I think that all the pieces are there. I think you have a really good writer. You have an artist who knows what they're doing. You have a colorist who clearly knows what they're doing. It just, none of it worked for this project at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, give them any other project, and I think it would be good. But yeah. I just don't think for this one, and we all know by watching his movies that Zack Snyder has a very specific, vision, and I mean it is artistic and stylized, and just sometimes it can border on just out there and kind of boring at points.
Yeah, and that's what I'm going to say about this whole thing. I don't know anything about Rebel Moon other than what we've just read right here. And I'm already so bored with it. I'm uninterested. Now, is part of that, me going into it as a Zack Snyder vehicle and then it being on Netflix, which I hate, very openly. Maybe I have, maybe I'm not giving it enough of a chance. But what's here, I did have a very open mind with. I was going to do my best to separate the comic book from what the movie is and all of that, and I think it falls flat. I don't think it works at all.
Well, see, and you should be able to do that because this is a prequel series, so it comes before the series. So technically, you shouldn't have to watch the movie to know what's going on. You should read what's going on and then watch the movie.
Yeah, and I think that this kind of goes back to that question you always have to ask yourself when you're reading something. What is the point of someone telling this story? Is the point because they have something really interesting to say? Is the point because they can build off something that somebody else already did? Do they have a really interesting corner of the world to be explored? Do they have like the story that only they could tell or whatever? This is just so generic and boring. Like, what was the purpose of this? I think that the purpose of this was, for Zack Snyder to create his Star Wars and hopefully, make a whole bunch of money off of it. I know it seems so uninspired and unoriginal. So, to get to our, most important question of the podcast, I think it's probably a given. Is this enough to bring you to issue number 2? Is there anything here where you're interested to see what might happen next? I'm in the complete same boat.
No,
I will not be picking up issue number 2.
Yeah, I just can't do this because reading it and me being tired aside, even as the dogs make their appearance on podcasts like normal.
A very loud appearance.
Just reading this, I mean, it was just so convoluted, so confusing, such a slogfest. I was just uninterested in the source material. Nothing drew me in.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. It's just there's nothing here. There's nothing of substance. And I feel very bad saying that. I can't think of another review that we've done where we didn't like the book this much. I think this might be the worst thing that we've reviewed so far in 53 episodes. But
issues work.
Yeah, sure. I do want to say this though, just to be fair and just to to be brutally honest. I think that the talent is there. I think that Magdalene, Clark, and Francisco on any other project would have made a very good book. I think that Magdalene really is a good writer and has a story to tell. I think that Clark, could illustrate the hell out of something else. And I think Francisco's colors would work anywhere else but here. I'm not blaming this creative team. I am blaming the source. It's boring and uninspired. And that's really all I can say about it. Yeah. I feel very bad. I hope that none of these creators ever listen to this podcast, and think that we think badly of their work. It's not you guys. It is the source.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I explained about Zack Snyder, I mean, you either like him or you hate him.
Yep, and like you're saying, unfortunately, that's what this podcast is for. You and I are both very open-minded, and there's been a lot of books that I was scared we were going to hate that we turned out loving. There's been a lot of books that I thought we were on the fence about, and then we came out with a good review. There's been things we didn't like as much, but
there's been Zack Snyder led projects we've really liked. I mean, 300 is one of my favorite movies.
Yep, a very good movie. Yeah, I completely agree. We're never here to shit on these creators or their vision or anything like that or their storytelling. They're doing much better than you or I could. So. Obviously, there's that. This just didn't work for us. Maybe it'll work for you. I don't know. I cannot suggest this to anyone, sadly. But please know, and I really want to make this point, I want to make sure this point gets across. That is at no fault of the creators, in my opinion. I think that they really, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I have to get that point across. I think they know what they're doing. I think the source material is just not there. It's just uninteresting. So yeah, that is a not recommend from me and Bob, and we'll take a break after that. Hello and welcome back to the all new, all different #1 comics podcast. We've got a very special creator interview on the line today. I'm speaking with Sam Freeman, of course, of Basic Instinct. Now, Sam, let me ask you this right off the top, because I don't know if you heard whenever me and Bob covered the comic on the podcast or not. Am I supposed to say Basic Instinct Pound of Flesh, or am I just supposed to say Basic Instinct?
Dude, that was first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No,
Pound of Flesh was like in my script, and it's like how I pitched it was Basic Instinct : Pound of Flesh, and in the emails, it was just referred to as Basic Instincts. I was like, oh, I guess they don't want to do that. And then when I first got the book, I was like, oh, shit. That's awesome.
It's in there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you can call it Basic Instinct. I'll know what you mean.
Yeah, well, understood. Hopefully, yeah. Which one are you talking about, man? Which
Yeah.
Basic Instinct comic? But yeah, no, really excited to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me here. I was actually so I'm gonna lay this out on like Front Street here because all of our listeners who checked out that episode and everything, which I mean we have. I will say this to kind of prop myself or whatever, or listeners of the podcast too. But very dedicated listener base. Doesn't matter what issue we cover, like everybody's there 110% all the time. Um, we have some like banger episodes, and then we have like some stuff where we cover like some really small indie stuff. Like it doesn't matter. Like the audience is always there for it. So really appreciate those guys and very awesome. But yeah, definitely the episode where we covered Basic Instinct. We got some really good feedback on. Definitely, had like a good listener engagement and everything. So what I like to do, and the reason I'm drawing this out and saying so much here is I'll get to the point in a second. But what I always like to do is after, and I always do this after we publish our episode. I never do it before. I never like to read any reviews or learn anything about. I really don't even like to read like synopsis from or solicits or anything from the publishers or previews or anything like that. But I like to go in as blind as possible. But after we publish our episode, I like to look at those things to see if they matched up with what I was reading. I like to look at reviews and stuff like that online, whatever. So I was looking a little bit on Comic Geek, League of Comic Geeks.
Yeah.
So I look there for reviews sometimes, on books, obviously YouTube, stuff like that. And there's like only a few reviews that I saw like at the point that I looked. And I saw like, this is weird, but like to me, it was like, I saw like mixed reviews, like I saw some people who were like, this is really cool. And some people like, I don't know what's going on. A lot of people saying, I'm not familiar enough with the source material to really like make any type of decision if this is good or not. And like, I felt the same way at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I just want to lay this out on Front Street. I'm totally gonna, hand the mic over to you after a second, and I'll shut up. But I thought the same thing. I was like, well, it's like a licensed property. I should really understand the source material beforehand. So the night before we did it, like I did sit down and watch the movie. I'm like horrible at that, dude. Like I'll lay down in bed to watch a movie at like 10:30 at night, and it doesn't matter if it's the greatest thing in the world, just fall asleep. So I never made it like all the way through the movie, and I was like, God, I don't know if I can really judge what's going on here because I'm not familiar enough with the source material. Fuck that. Put all that aside. Like you shouldn't do that. Like in all honesty, I'm sure there's like a lot of added benefit if you really know the source material well and everything, and there's Easter eggs and all of that. But like, you're an author, like you can tell a compelling story without saying like you've got to know every single detail about this. And like, I mean, fill in the blanks, with your imagination a little bit, like whatever. There's things you can do there. But yeah, that was like kind of my take on it. Was there were so many people out there saying, well, this is a comic, I don't know enough about the source material, blah blah blah. And like I think that's like such a shitty and lazy way to review something, in my opinion. Like I just don't understand why anybody would go into something with that kind of expectation. Like I mean, go read like Marvel's like Transformers #1 or something. Like who cares, dude? You don't have to like know like everything about every single toy, everything about everything that came before that, like whatever. Like it's just stupid to me. But yeah, the reason I kind of go into that is because if you listen to our review on it, I was actually very surprised with how much I liked this book. To tell you the truth, like I wasn't expecting that, and it is Vanesa Del Rey on art, so I already knew I was going to love that, but obviously I didn't know anything about your writing or anything, or what this book was going to be about. And I really loved it. And I was really excited to read issue #2. Bob was like so weirded out by it that he wanted to read issue #2. So like it wins in our podcast, like we're telling everybody to go read issue #2, but for different reasons. But either way, yeah, I just wanted to get that out there. And then, what's your opinion on that? Like, do you have, obviously you don't want to alienate anybody out there reviewing your stuff, but I'll shut up so you can talk.
I mean, I think like, I think I'm like fully aware of, so let me just preface by saying like, I'm a huge fan of the movie. And I think it's so weird. Like, I feel like this experience, and this is also like, the way it kind of like worked out was this is the first book I've ever published. Like there was some stuff that kind of like was supposed to come out. It got kind of mixed up in like the Aftershock shuffle. But this is just kind of how it ended up being. But I saw Basic Instinct, a handful of years, 5 years ago or something, and it was just like informed so much of like what I like. Like I don't think it's like the greatest movie of all time, but I think it's like there's just so much like cool stuff that in it that I like. So I think when I've talked to people about this, like when I first got it and I was like, I'm writing like a Basic Instinct comic. I think people were like, oh, you just like you're just like writing like fan fiction about Basic Instinct. And or there's also people like when it came out, the first issue came out, I would post it on like, I don't know, Reddit and be like, hey, I wrote this, like, if you buy it, let me know what you think. And people were like, is it just like an adaptation of the comic? So I think there's like a weird, and outside of that too, I think it's like a 30-year-old movie that kind of came and went. Like it was big when it came out, but they're not like having like Basic Instinct cons in Las Vegas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is like a hard sell just from the jump. And I think like I from the get-go like kind of wanted to do something like pretty outside of Basic Instinct, or like at least that first movie. I didn't, to be honest, I haven't seen the second movie. But I kind of just want to do something outside of it. And I think there is some stuff, especially in the later issues, that are heavy references. Or in the first issue, there's a line from the movie, and obviously it centers around Catherine Trammell. But I think I want everyone to watch that movie because I think the movie's awesome. I think I just like kind of just wanted to write like a weird story about like the effect of violence. You know what I mean? And I've definitely I know people are like, don't read your reviews, but like I feel like I'm like insane with it. I'm like up at like 3 a.m. being like, I gotta see if someone said something about it in China. And
they do.
And it's like it's kind of flown under the radar, which is cool, but like the first couple of reviews I got were pretty like gnarly, if I'm being honest. And I was like, oh my god, I'm like an idiot. And then I saw yours, and I saw it was like an hour, and I was like, oh my god, like I was so like ready to be like just like torn apart. And it was really odd. I like sent it to people and being like, yeah, it's like things are going pretty well for me. But yeah, no, it's cool. It was cool hearing it because I feel like it was I think you were like, yeah, it's like David Lynch, like Lynchian, which is
definitely
like 100% the vibe I was going through. So I was like really, really excited you said that. But yeah, I think there's a lot of media out there, and especially now there's a lot of sequels or reboots or these kind of side stories that pop up in all different forms of media. And the point of those, I think, or really anything, is that it's supposed to be kind of, comics in particular, there's a comic out there for everyone. There's a Batman comic. Like I don't read main title Batman, but I like a lot of the side stories, or they're really kind of condensed down, or things that kind of happen within a bubble. That's the stuff I'm interested in. And I think the main plot of Basic Instinct isn't it's pretty straightforward, and I think if you know that, you can kind of fill in the blanks for yourself with what happens in this comic.
Yeah, and that's something again that not to retread here or whatever, but it is. It's just I mean, if your purpose is to review something, objectively or whatever, and say, is this like a good piece of media, for this reason or this reason? I mean, it is very hard to come out and say, I'm not familiar enough with this to judge this. I mean, if you took that, for instance, and said, I can't. I don't know, judge music because I can't play music, whatever. Yeah, you
Right.
can. I mean, that's
Yeah.
lazy. That's stupid. You have an opinion. You have an informed opinion, but yeah, that's just I don't know. I mean, I thought it was important to kind of get that out of the way first
Yeah.
because I thought that was very interesting. Bob and I, my co-host for the podcast proper, we look, the point of our podcast is we find a first issue comic book that's newly released that week, and we do it at random on top of that. So we're not sitting here, playing favorites or saying, I want to pick a Spider-Man book this week or anything like that. We do it at random. We put, all the new number ones in like a random wheel, and then whatever it lands on is what we cover. And we go into that, like whether it's like I said before, the smallest indie book, like a Superman book, whatever it is, with the same intention, okay, let's break down the story beats. Let's talk about the narrative. Let's talk about the world building, the dialogue. Let's talk about the art, break that down into characters and into color, all of that stuff. And like I said before, whenever we landed on your book, I mean, I was already a big fan of Vanesa Del Rey. I really, really love her work. It's very, very stylized. I think you guys were a very good team up for this. I think to tell the story that you wanted to tell here, it was very important that you got the right artist. I think that if you would have landed with somebody with a more conventional style or whatever, however, you word something like that, somebody like a little bit more vanilla or whatever in the comic book world, I don't think it would have came across right. I don't think it would have got that tone. And, that's a really good pairing, you guys together. I absolutely want to talk about that pairing. Like, did you have anything to do with that? Did Sumerian set you guys up? Did you already know Vanessa? Like, how'd that work?
So I think like the whole process has been was kind of weird. So, the way I kind of got this book was a friend of mine who I've read some other stuff with, and we had the book that was supposed to come out through Aftershock. He had a book through Behemoth that then became Sumerian Comics. And I guess they sent him, they were kind of dabbling in kind of expanding their licensed titles. And he sent me an email. I was on a plane. I was like about to take off. And he sent me this email that was like, these are all the licensed titles. And it was basically just being like, isn't that crazy? And I just like zeroed in on Basic Instinct. And like the moment I saw it, they were like, all right, you have to turn your cell phone off. So the whole flight, I was like, if I don't get this fucking book, or if I don't like write this book, I'm going to be like so bummed. So we landed, and I like immediately texted him. I was like, dude, I'll like literally do anything for you to give me an email. And I pitched the book, and they were like, cool. Yeah, that's cool. You're going to be working with Vanesa Del Rey. And I was like, hey, that's that's insane. Like, what are you talking about? But it was cool because it was like that style, her style is so up my alley. It's just like so like what I look for when I read comics is that kind of super stylized, super kind of like there's a lot of movement in it. There's a lot of, it feels like it's like vibrant. There's a lot of like electricity, and it feels like and I started writing the scripts, and I had never talked to her. And like towards the end of it, I like emailed her, and I was like, hey, do you like this? Like, is this good? And
is this okay enough for you to work with?
Yeah, and she was like, yeah, I'm like pretty much done. So yeah, I guess it's, even if I don't, that's, but it was cool. And I think it's like when I first started seeing pages from it, from the first issue, I was like, yeah, this is like exactly what I thought of. This is so cool. And I think for the type of story it is, it's like there's just not a better artist for it. I think it's just so cool. Like I met her at New York Comic Con. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, she's awesome. Kayla, the woman that did the color for it too, they were both there, and they're both incredible, and they're so professional, and just like I couldn't have asked for like a better team on that book. And it's cool because like when I finally met them, I at least got the vibe that they liked it, which is cool.
and good, yeah.
yeah. And no, I'm really lucky to have gotten the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and Kayla, is that how I pronounce her name?
Yeah.
The colorist. Okay. Yeah, that was one of the points that Bob really wanted to make whenever we did our review of the book. One of the things that really stood out to him, because Bob and I, like, I don't know, sometimes we're on the same page, sometimes we're completely different. We have that kind of dynamic. But Bob is not the hugest fan of Vanesa Del Rey, which blows my mind, because I'm like, are you blind? But it's not that he doesn't like her stuff. It's just he doesn't always like her stuff. It's not an immediate sell for him. But what really kind of drew Bob in was the colors. He was like, I really appreciate this palette that's going on here in conjunction with the art. And then he was like, the tone, is so fitting, the palette that she's using and everything. It's very, very vibrant, but dark at the same time, which is like contradicting, but it really works. Just such a cool tone there. And I think with the story that you're telling throughout these books, it has to have something like that. Like I said before, I just can't imagine this with like a very traditional, like a Jamal Campbell type of art or something like that. Right. Like I can't see that. I can't see it working at all. But you talked a little bit about how you got involved with the book, which, I mean, that's so cool. I really can't imagine. Now, you said this is your first published writing credit.
Right.
You had something going on with Aftershock beforehand, but that kind of fell apart with Aftershock falling apart. So have you been like writing scripts and pitching them for like a little while before this came about? Or
so I was pitching a little bit. Since I was like, I don't know, like 8, I was like drawing comics and like coming up with characters and stuff, but I really kind of doubled down on writing scripts and writing pitches and just kind of developing stuff within comics. Probably within like the last 10 years or so. And it kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit, but over the last few years, I've really kind of, doubled down on it. I was pitching a lot of different stuff, like 3 years prior to me finally getting Basic Instinct. Some stuff got close, and then March of 2022, my writing partner, Sam Romsberg, another Sam, we got a book through Aftershock, and it was like all written, and then kind of, what happened. And but a few, like, it was crazy. So I have a book coming out in February called Hound through Mad Cave Studios. The same day I got Hound, or we got confirmation that they wanted to pick it up, is when I got the email from Sumerian. They're like, yeah, the licensors like your pitch. I was like, what do you mean? Like, it's insane. But it was cool. And it was like one of these things, like a few months had passed since I first pitched it, and they kind of gave me like the breakdown of like, it's going to be with Vanesa Del Rey, and it's going to be for however much, and they gave me the breakdown. I sent in the pitch, and I didn't hear anything, and I was like, I mean, that was cool. Like, even if I don't get it, it's like cool that I got to do that, and it was like crazy. It was like such a wild email.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. And it's awesome. And it's cool too, because I think just how things have kind of rolled out. This is like this type of story, like kind of a weird thriller, or like a weird like detective thing, is like, so it's like just all I want to tell, and getting to do it in under the lens of it being like a Basic Instinct story is like, that's awesome. It's really cool.
Yeah, it has to be really, really cool to have that license attached to it, to have that name familiarity. Uh, that's I think something that obviously would help sell a book. On top of that, aside from just having your original property, at an indie publisher, and then trying to hustle and get that out and trying to get that out into people's hands. At least something like this has the name recognition of the movie to go along with it, so that I love this story because it's like, and I don't want to come across as saying like you didn't put the work in, because I'm hearing you. You obviously did. You've been, like you said, in some form or another, working on comics since you were like 8 years old. But
Yeah.
this is a great success story. I talk to a lot of creators. I have people on who are just starting out trying to do a Kickstarter, all the
Mm-hmm.
way up to people like Steve Fox, who have like 8 million comic books published with like Marvel and DC, and
Right.
Tyler Crook, people out there just hustling, like writing and drawing their own books and getting them
Right.
out into everybody's hands and all that. Like, we talk to everybody on here, so it's very rare that you hear like a story like this. Like you said, you started out really kind of pitching things. You had a friend who was heard about this book, and you're like, dude, I want in. Like, I'll
Yeah.
come up with a script. And you did, and it all, everything fell into place. You got hooked up with Vanesa Del Rey, and this book's out in stores and going. And that's such a cool success story for our listeners to hear. One thing that I always like to point out, because a lot of the feedback that we get here on the podcast is that how the comic book community is. A lot of people listening to the podcast are also aspiring artists or writers. So to hear what you guys came from, what you were facing, how you got to where you got and everything is really cool for them to hear. And this is such a cool success story. I mean, not saying that this probably isn't going to work out for everybody. It's not like you guys can be like, well, I don't know, Goodfellas is my favorite movie, so I'm going to write a Goodfellas script and then pitch it to Sumerian, and then I'm going to, sign on with my favorite artist and put out a book. But, I mean, it can happen. So you go
Yeah.
out there and you try,
Yeah, and I think prior to that too, I mean, in those 10 years, I was really kind of putting a lot of work in, and it was a lot of no's, and it was a lot of like, just kind of like abusing people's inboxes with being like, can you just read this? Like, nothing has to come with it. Can you just read the script? And I mean, I think like what I was always told and what I did in the beginning was like always just like asking a bunch of questions and just like finding people whose work I respect and being like I'm not asking for like a favor, just like, can you like, how do I like with pitches, like what's like the best, I think that all the power kind of lies in the pitches and just like asking the best way to format, or asking like like what's like the most effective intention piece at the very end. So that was huge. And I think just asking a lot of questions is the biggest tool you have. And then the other thing is that what everyone told me when I had at least try to do is that if you get in, you hold the door open for people behind you. So it's I always, if someone asks me, if someone's in my position, or I'm still asking questions, but if someone is just starting out and ask me questions, it's carte blanche. I'll answer anything, you know what I mean? And I think like with comics in particular, it's one of the only kind of creative fields that I can think of that's at both times creative and mechanical, where there is like, in a script, it's everything kind of has to have a page turn, or you have to have your something happens at 11 and then it ends at 22, and there's just a lot of like mechanics that are involved with kind of crafting that. And I think that's the stuff that, again, when I was first starting out, was like gold for me, of or like someone just like being like breaking down, like, writing a comic pitch for dummies for me, I think that stuff is so valuable and still is too. And it's like, I try to like reference as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that you point that out. For a while, I was really trying to, script some stuff myself, and I just, I took a long break from it, so I haven't gone back to it. But one of my biggest inspirations, or somebody that like I can always go to and be like, I really appreciate their material a lot. I really appreciate their like approach more than anything else, and like how they get involved and everything. And this is probably going to show my age here, but is Kevin Smith. Like I really like Kevin Smith. I love Kevin Smith's movies and his comics and all of that. And I can't remember the name of the book now, but there was a point where Kevin Smith wrote a book and he broke down that entire process of scripting his Green Arrow comic for DC. And I mean, down to the letter, he was like, here's exactly how I format on page. Here's, how I, what I want in the dialogue balloons. Here's what I've told the artist, blah, blah, blah. And that was so eye opening for me because it's easy. You can go online and read a script to a movie. You can see a lot of that stuff, but comic book scripts are not really out there, for the most part. So sometimes breaking into that, if you've never had any experience with it, you're not friends with other creators or whatever, it can be, I don't know, you just end up doing your own thing, and I guess it works for you or not. But it's nice to have like a template or some advice there too. So yeah, I really like that as well. I think that that's really important. Like we talk about the comic book community, and obviously it's similar in a lot of ways to like other entertainment community, novel writers, screenwriters, all of that stuff, acting, everything. But it's so inclusive here, and it's so like I don't want to say not pretentious, because I feel like I can kind of overuse that phrase, but I mean, you can really basically get down on like anybody's level. Like you can, you can email Alex Ross and say, hey, like I really appreciated this. Like, can I get you on the podcast to talk to you, about it? And he actually writes back and he goes, yeah, I'd love to. I'm a little bit busy right now, but hit me up in 3 months or whatever. I mean, you're not going to get that with your favorite director or whatever. It's not going to happen. There's those kinds of things that are, just really cool with the comic book community. And like you said, kind of asking people what they did or whatever is very important as well. So I just really like that you point that out there. I think that that's very important, to keep that thing going. Everybody, once you break in, like you said, you hold the door open for the next person. That's really, really cool. Really good advice, that I think everybody should follow in whatever the hell they're doing. So,
and I mean, prior to comics too, I was in a band for like 10 years, and
good. Then we have some talking to do. So please,
like I was like it was like a kind of like a hardcore band, and I mean that community is like tough. Like that's a tough thing, and it's like it's such a stark difference between when I was doing that and it was this like you can do you can feel like you're making like all these right moves and just like nothing's happening. And I think with comics, people are like you're saying, just so like open to be like, yeah, this is just what I did, or like, yeah, here's like what my script looks like. And it's not like this is like exactly what you do. It's just like here's an example. This is like an option for you. And I think it's so cool, and it's so like refreshing, just because it's like being in bands and like like playing in, like you spend so much money to go on tour, and then you go to this place in like South Carolina and it's a room the size of like the back of a toilet bowl. And you're like, no one's
just
there.
The sound guy and the door guy there.
And they don't really want to listen to you, and you still I guess like maybe it's practice, and then like it's brutal, and it's like it's really brutal. And I think it's so refreshing. It's so awesome to be like it's just not like, I don't know, like some people have messaged me and just said like really nice things. And it's like it's so foreign. I felt like when in bands. So it's awesome.
And you're really right about that. Again, that's something that I can definitely take notice of and comment on too. I play in a couple of bands right now. Like I've played drums like my whole life. I'm really big into music, and the community is just so different. It's such a different thing. You're not going to get any of those inside secrets from anybody. Like no one's going to tell you shit. Like they kind of want you. They're like, you got to pay your dues. You go figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, every now and again, you might have like a friend's band or somebody that you can latch onto. Maybe they're a little bit more successful or whatever. But yeah, as far as booking shows, going out on tour, like you said, I mean, they're 9 times out of 10 you're playing to an empty room, and it's degrading, and it's very unencouraging, for you to get up and move on after that. And I think you're right. The comic book community is it's so different, and it's such a, if you have something in mind, if you're, if you want to color, if you want to illustrate, if you want to write, whatever you want to do in comics, like just get up and do it. Just get up and try. The likelihood that something might become of it is like in your favor. Definitely get out there and do it. If you have a story to tell, I guess that's the most important thing. If you have a story to tell, like get out there and tell it. It's not going to be as bad as like me and Sam's experience. Trying to go out and play shows and all of that. And yeah, and definitely. And I had some really successful, things happen throughout the years, and then, but most of the time was, spent, like you said, playing to an empty room. So
yeah,
very, very interesting and very cool that you have that experience as well. So how about in comics? You've got Hound coming. You've got, is it 2 more issues or 3 more issues of Basic Instinct?
2 more issues, yeah.
2 more. Okay, so it's a 4-part. So you've got that coming. I'm sure you're working on some other projects you probably can't even tell us about right now, which is fine. But how about your inspiration in comics? What do you read? What did you read before you started writing? Like, what are you really into?
So, I mean, it's kind of all over the place. I think, when I first started reading comics, like really getting into comics, it was like Ultimate Spider-Man hit me at the perfect time. I was like 8 when it first started coming out, and it was like hook, line, and sinker after that. I had like
so how excited are you that Ultimate Spider-Man's coming back like next week?
I saw like the first couple of pages of it. I guess they did preview pages, and I was like, this is so sick. It's so cool.
I know, I can't wait.
Yeah, and it's like an older Peter Parker, and it's like, I'm old, and but so I mean, it was that I had like a Wizard magazine subscription up until like the bitter end.
Oh man.
And I was like obsessed with it. So I mean, that was kind of like really informative, and I think now it's like, like Karen Berger is like the most important person in comics. I'm like, each day I like dress in all black and like put a rose on Vertigo Comics grave. You know what I mean? I just like that period of comics. I think is just so interesting, and like the well is so deep, and I think like I gravitate towards things now that feel like that, or kind of have that vibe to it, of just kind of like weird, kind of like just operating on this like different level,
I can't agree with you more. Ultimate Spider-Man, some amazing stuff, and Vertigo had some really, really good stuff too. I guess, really kind of the last thing that I want to talk about here before we wrap up, like time's flying. I've already taken like 35 minutes of your time, so we won't go too much longer here. But with the book in particular, with Basic Instinct here, I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Of course, in our review, we recap the entire first issue. So if you've already listened to that and you haven't read the book, then what the hell are you doing? Go out and read the book. But you already know what happened in that first issue. I really couldn't wait. And look, just to show, I mean, I got the books, but I really couldn't wait for issue number 2 to drop. Like, I was really interested. You talk about, in comics, you have to hook the reader in on that final page. You have to make people interested for the second issue. And that's something that's really important. That's it's not overlooked, but it's not like thought about very much. the amount of effort that goes into, you know, those final couple of panels, the last page, whatever, you know, to set up what's going to happen next. And then, you know, and then on top of that, you have to decide from there, you know, are you picking up issue number 2? Is it going to like go right into that? Or are we going to skirt around for a little bit and then come back to it? Like, there's a lot of thought put in to what happens at the end of a first issue for sure. In this second issue here, it definitely expands out the world a little bit more, and it definitely involves Catherine Trammell a lot more. Am I saying that right? Trammell? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely involves her a lot more. You know, she's really introduced here, and then you're seeing kind of what's going on with her and everything. And it sets up a lot. I can't imagine how the hell you're going to tell the rest of the story in only 2 issues. So they've got to be like jam packed. I don't think you're going to have any time to breathe there, but
I hope you did.
But I mean, you know, in all honesty, and this isn't just because, you know, I'm face to face talking with you right now or anything, you know, I said my honest review on the podcast. Like, I do think this is really well written. I think that you have a gift of, you know, being able to write very well and articulate what you're trying to say, like on the page there. One of the most important things to me, aside from that cliffhanger, is how the writer, you know, is scripting that book and then communicates that to the artist. Comic books are very visual. Obviously, you can jam pack a whole shitload of dialogue and exposition and all that. I don't like that. I'm not a fan of that. I don't want to read. I mean, maybe this sounds lazy of me, but like, you know, I'm not looking to read a novel when I read a comic book. I'm looking for some substance and really good dialogue and overall like very, very appealing art. So whenever the writer can really throw the keys to the artist and say like, hey, here's what I'm going for, like, you know, here's what I need from you, and then let them drive, like that's really how it works it perfectly for me. So that's why I suggested this book. That's why I really think that it's a very well written book and a good book. Is I can tell your process with Vanessa there. Like you really let her shine throughout this book. And to me, that's the most important thing you could do. So that's definitely why it's a win for me. The, you know, kind of like final thing I want to talk about here is this second issue cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into spoilers for it. We only do first issues, so I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it yet. But like, definitely, I promise you guys, you want to go out there and pick it up, because if 1 didn't hook you, like 2 definitely will. But I feel like I see where we're going, but I also feel like, you know, there's some curves in there. There's definitely some curves that I'm not expecting. Again, like I don't want you to tell me how you're going to wrap this up in 2 issues, but when you originally penned this, did you know that you were getting 4 issues?
Yeah, so it was when I kind of sent those initial emails to Sumerian about it. Right off the bat, they were like, Vanesa Del Rey, 4 issues. So I knew, wow. I knew it was going to be 4 issues. And I think, like you were saying too, is that when I initially started doing it, I was like, it's going to be, you know, over the course of like 3 days, you know, or 2 days. It's just going to be the straight, you know, through line, and it's going to be from the POV of this main person entirely. And I think, yeah, I mean, I threw a lot of stuff at the wall, I think, and I hope it stuck. I mean, I think, surprisingly, I mean, I think this is like a really personal book to me, and I'm going to preface this by saying I am in therapy, so we're good there. But so like when I was writing these scripts, I was working at a pretty horrible job. It was like a desk job, and it was like full days without talking to people. So I was writing a lot, and just to give like, you know, me something to like latch on to during the day when I was bored. It's gonna sound bad, but I mean, it is what it is. would like watch videos of like people getting like hit by trains and stuff. People getting like in like horrible accidents. And it got to a point where I was like, I'm like so desensitized by this, and like so like it's just like this is like so bad. So I mean, I think a lot of the book is kind of about like the ripple effect of violence, and you know, one person's femme fatale is another person's murderer, and kind of what that means on a larger scale, and then just also kind of so kind of go back to Kayla and how her colors were used in the intention part, the last part of my pitch. I brought up that I feel like the first Basic Instinct movie is the consequence of the 80s. So it's, you know, Michael Douglas's character is like his history is that he shot Taurus while he was on coke. And it's this kind of like it's just coming out of the 80s, like there's still remnants of it there. So I love that it feels like every panel is like a neon sign. And like, or like a flickering neon, because there's so many dark spots. So it's like a flickering neon sign. And I think as much as I think that first movie is a, you know, apology or like the consequence of the 80s, this story to me is like an apology to viewing violence and like, you know, witnessing someone's tragedy. And I think just because seeing someone get like sucked up in like factory machinery is like the worst possible thing you can watch. That like it's kind of like an apology for like, oh, sorry I watched all that. And I think you know, the stuff with the snake in the beginning is like it doesn't really correlate for the rest of the story, but I would say that it is entirely what the story is about. And like you know, it's a woman dancing with something that is dangerous, but she has like, she instills this trust in, and then the snake operates on instinct and kills her, and then or tries to kill her, and then Ezra, who was our POV in the story, is watching this happen for entertainment. And it's this kind of idea that it's like, this is, if that's the entertainment, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And it's again just this like one person's femme fatale is another person's murder, or it's, there's always kind of this ripple effect of anything that a human does in the world, and if it's a bad thing, that ripple goes on much longer than, you know, if someone just steps on a twig and snaps it, you know.
And I again, like I don't want to take too much of your time, like I'll definitely wrap up here, but I think that that's one of the most intriguing things about it. I had talked in the review about how, you know, parts of it were very Lynchian to me. Like you brought it up at the beginning of this, that, you know, you're kind of inspired by David Lynch, you know, maybe like, you know, somewhere in your conscious or whatever. But I think that that's the important thing whenever you break down something like that, whenever you look at like art that way, sometimes, of course, sometimes you're trying to, you know, tell a fable or whatever. Sometimes it's so people can get, you know, a message out of it, or good or bad or whatever. Sometimes we're just like an observer in what's going on,
right?
And sometimes, you know, unfortunately, you know, good and evil do exist in the world. Those are both like two very real things, you know, whether they're cosmic or whether they're just human or whatever is beyond, you know, me talking about it. But you know, it is interesting to take a look at those things, you know, and observe them and really take them for what they are. We spend so much time talking, you know, about it, you know, as a society or humans or whatever, like this is inherently bad, this is inherently good or whatever. Like do we ever really take the step back to look at something, you know, bad or something good, and like and figure out why we think it is that way? Is society telling us whatever? I'm not trying to get like punk rock philosophical on you, but like it's you know, it's very interesting to look at things in that kind of way. So yeah, I think that I think this is an important book, and when I say that, I really do mean it. I think that this is a book that everybody should absolutely check out, and that is not because I have you on the show right now. That's not because we reviewed the book. We reviewed the book by happenstance, and luckily you were gracious enough to come on and talk to me. So those are the two elements of that. But I think that this book is like absolutely worth a conversation. It's definitely worth reading and talking about. Whenever we get into the world of indie comics and stuff like that, it's very easy to get drowned out by some of the really big titles that are out there. I don't know, the massive universe that Image has going on right now, and Spawn and stuff like that. And there's very, very interesting stories to be told in some of these like smaller publishers. Sumerian, also, you were talking about, they're trying to get more into the licensed stuff. They just had American Psycho come out, I guess like a month or two before this book came out.
I think it came out in like September.
So again, like a very interesting book, very interesting source material. I definitely wouldn't say it's better source material than this, but very interesting to say the least, with something to say. So I think this is a definite win for Sumerian, obviously a win for you and a win for us to be able to read this stuff. But I would like to see, what else Sumerian and I guess in association with Massive is putting out right now, as far as licensed stuff. I really appreciate licensed stuff. It's another look at a property or like a very deep dive into that world. And I think that those kind of stories are really compelling and interesting. But yeah, I'll shut the hell up. I do want to say before we close out that issue number 3 drops January 31st. So that should be in your local comic book shops January 31st. The most important thing that you guys can do out there as like fans or, just comic book community peoples is, make sure you hit up your local comic book shop and let them know before FOC goes off that you want this in your pool. Hopefully, I'm not sure if it's sold out at the distributors level, but, if you don't have issue number 1, try to see if your local shop can order you a copy of issue number 1, issue number 2, all of that. Make sure you get issue number 3, and then issue 4 is supposed to drop February 28th. So let your local comic book shop know to add that to your pool. That's the very best thing you can do as a fan of comic books is to do that. And Sam, like anything else you have to say, like any projects you want to push, anything else you want to say about this, and I'll shut up.
Buy the book, if not for the story, for Vanessa and Kayla's art, because it's incredible. I'm so extremely lucky to have like anything I've written be like represented by their art. Also coming out through Sumerian, Sam Romsberg and Ben Roberts. One of Us is a Killer. It's a Dillinger escape plan book. Very, very sick. Wow. Very cool. And I work at Diamond. So if you don't order it, I'll know.
Sam will know if it is not sold out. So.
Yeah, I look at the sales every day. So it's, you better get those orders in, buddy.
Yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, I can't thank you enough, man. Thank you so much for coming on. It's really cool talking to you. Really awesome to hear about your experiences in comics and the experience with this comic book. And thanks so much again, man. And hopefully we'll keep in touch.
Dude, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the kind words. This has been great.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.
Hello and welcome back to episode number 53 of the All New All Different #1 Comics podcast. And thank you for listening to that very intriguing interview with Sam Freeman of Basic Instinct. Bob, we are here to tell them about some new books that are dropping next week in local comic book shops. But as you guys know, before we do that, it's disclaimer time. It's disclaimer time with Bob.
Like I always ask, implore you guys, please, somebody set that to music and send it to us. We would greatly appreciate it.
Heavily auto-tuned with like a with like a 90s breakbeat behind it, is what I'm asking for. So
I say beatboxing.
That'd be nice too.
So, yeah, as I always state, this is just a few of the key issues that are hopefully coming out next week.
Fingers crossed, Bob. Fingers crossed.
And if you want a more in-depth list of what's coming out, please consult us elsewhere. You call your local comic shop, send them a letter, write them an email, smoke signal.
Snail mail works, Harry Potter owls, whatever you got, hit up your local comic book shop. You can also call them, ask them to read those synopsises to you and everything. Like we always say, if you're in Jacksonville, Florida, like Bob and I, hit up Gotham City Limit. Ben would absolutely love to tell you more about all these books. Give them a call. Tell them that Bob and Dan from the All New All Different #1 Comics podcast sent you.
Don't rope me into that.
Please, kids, rope Bob into that.
So, starting off the list is a big one from Image Comics. We have Cobra Commander #1.
Yeah, Bob, how excited are we about this? This is the premiere issue. I'm not sure how many issues this is going to be. I'm guessing like a 4-part or something, kind of like Duke is supposed to be.
I was going to say, I mean, if this is written anything like Duke, then it's, I mean, G.I. Joe is in safe hands over,
it's in really good
over
hands.
at Image.
And it is written by Joshua Williamson, so yeah, we got that to look forward to. Thank God.
So it will be very well written.
Yes.
Next from DC, we have Batman Off-World #3.
Yeah, Batman's taking more trips off-world. We have this very interesting cover that proves that. This one has the possible first appearance of Thanagarian.
Yes.
A bounty hunter.
The Thanagarian.
Okay, yes, the. I didn't want to backtrack and have to say the word again, though. So,
Sticking with DC, we have, and I know we have a lot of fans of this character, me being one of them, we have John Constantine Hellblazer, Dead in America #1.
Yeah, this looks cool, and it's written by Cy Spurrier, so I mean, that's a buy-in for me. I'll definitely be checking this out. This is the first issue in an 8-issue limited series.
Sticking with DC, we have Superman #10.
Yes, and this is the possible first appearance of the Man from Yesterday, an Old West version of Clark Kent.
Yes.
And it says possible, but I mean, I say, judging by the cover there, that's probably what we're going to
get. No, there's after the end of last issue, there's no possible about it.
Yeah.
We're going to get an Old West version of Clark Kent. Going to Marvel, we have Daredevil #5.
Yeah, Daredevil has been really fun lately. I'll definitely give it that. This one's featuring an all-new villain for Daredevil to face down. So that sounds fun. But yeah, this Saladin Ahmed has been writing the shit out of Daredevil, so yeah.
Can you guess who the cover is? Is it just by looking at that picture?
I don't know, Bob. I'm going to go with Ramita Jr., but,
Yes.
We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, sticking with Marvel, we have Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, #3.
Yeah, and can I say how stoked I am to read issue #2 today? Later today, I'll be checking out issue #2. Can't wait to read that one. This one, definitely, this one's got the first appearance of Werewolf by 2099. So instead of Werewolf by Night, we've got Werewolf by 2099 there. Really excited about that as well.
Sticking with Marvel, we have would you say one-shot?
Yes, this is a one-shot, and this is the first... sorry, Bob, you didn't announce the name yet. My bad.
It's one-shot, Jackpot #1.
Yeah, this one is, like you said, it's a one-shot. It's the first solo title featuring Mary Jane as Jackpot.
Which, that's kind of weird making it a one-shot, but it's the first solo title.
Yeah, exactly.
That just doesn't make sense. Sticking with Marvel, we have Cable #1.
And I think this is it's a 5-issue tie-in to the fall of the House of X and the rise of the Powers of 10. This is the first team appearance of the Neocracy. There we go.
Yes. And finally, from Marvel, Marvel, we have Avengers Twilight #1.
With the first appearance of a new Iron Man, not in armor. So, just man, I guess. And
Isn't that Tony Stark?
yeah, pretty much. So this one is a 6-issue futuristic tale where Steve Rogers leads the Defenders against the Avengers, who are corrupt and use their might to run the world.
So it's basically going to be... It almost sounds like Marvel's version of Kingdom Come.
Oh, yeah, it kind of does, huh?
It really does, because, that was the old established heroes against the new up-and-comers who were, basically in it, for the establishment and for, money and fame and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this should be interesting. I'm definitely excited to read it.
Yeah.
I was almost hoping that it was a Avengers and Twilight crossover, and we would get these sparkling vampires introduced into the...
Blade against sparkly vampires.
Now, that's a franchise Marvel should pick up.
Yeah.
I'm not even lying. I think that it would be wonderful in comic book form, written by some amazing writers over there at Marvel and illustrated by some really good people. But yeah, I'd love to see an
Werewolf by Night versus Team Jacob.
Oh, man. Team Jacob for the win. That's all I can say. But, yeah, Marvel, if you're listening, get on that. Look, me and Bob will write it for you. It's written. We won't even take pay. It's fine. We'll do it for free.
Yeah.
With that being said, we've got 3 books on the wheel here. Of course, our wheelofnames.com. Not sponsored by yet. Come on, guys. Get on it. We know you're listening. We've got 3 books on the wheel here, and we're going to spin that wheel to determine which book we'll cover next week. And just to give you guys a sneak peek behind the curtain, we've got Cobra Commander #1, Avengers Twilight, Avengers vs. Twilight, and James Bond 007 issue #1, all on the wheel. That James Bond 007 written by Garth Ennis, so that's going to be damn interesting.
It's going to be violent.
Yeah, to say the least. So we will spin the wheel here. Oops, and I just accidentally created a 4th space, so let's get rid of that. And we will spin the wheel, Bob.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, I'm not stalling at all. Don't worry. Bob, looks like we're going back to the Intergon universe, and we will be talking about Cobra Commander issue #1 next week. Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that, Bob. That's
again, if it's anything like Duke, we have a winner.
Yeah, we sure do. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the all-new, all-different #1 Comics podcast. Thanks for hanging with us for an almost 2-hour-long episode, and appreciate you guys checking out that interview we did there with Sam Freeman of Basic Instinct. But you guys know where to find us on the web. Make sure you check us out on social media. We're on Instagram at ANAD_1 Comics Podcast. We are on X at ANADNO Comic Pod, and we are on TikTok at ANAD1 Comics Pod. You can also check us out on YouTube under the Comic Book Channel. This and every single week, me and Bob love to give away a copy of the book that we just covered, although I don't know if you're going to actually want a copy of this one. Maybe just look at the background art for inspiration. I don't know. But it does have nice, thick pages that are highly glossy. I'll give it that. So it's a well-constructed comic.
It's a cool cover.
Yeah, it's got a number of cool covers on it. But yeah, if you want a copy of this book to check it out for yourself, use that hashtag #AllNewAllDifferentNation on the social media post of your choice to be entered in our giveaway. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.